Hey, we are the Coalition, Civilly Disobedient Media, here at your Pawtucket School Committee meeting. Tonight was a workshop meeting. A lot of things happened. One piece of breaking news that I want to cover, but then I want to open up the conversation really from Chairman Charbonneau's perspective about the events of the last week or so. But breaking news, in a sense, the $3.2 million hath returned.
It has returned.
It has come home.
It has come home. It is in the Capital Reserve Fund.
Right. So, was there ever any real official explanation, or is this just one of these situations? Let's do the right thing and move on.
Yeah, I think I don't know that there was a real official explanation. There was some confusion about where it was moved to, and then who was supposed to move it from that location. But at the end of the day, it was transferred over yesterday afternoon and deposited into our capital reserve this morning.
And where does that leave the Capital Reserve Fund in terms of a balance, or is that still unclear?
It's a little bit unclear. We have some encumbrances on it, but we're looking in that neighborhood of $3.5 to $4.5 million once the encumbrances are paid on that.
Right, and then moving on to the, if you will, the vendor payment cease and desist statement upcoming on April 15th. Is that still in force?
To my knowledge, that is still in force. I think that was delivered because of the bonding issue that the city finds itself in, and my understanding is they're going to go out for a ban. A bond anticipation note in the neighborhood of $30 million, $40 million,
right,
and then eventually bond the rest of the project, at a later date.
All right, so folks, if you're just joining us here, I'm with Jay Charbonneau. He is the chair of the Pawtucket City School Committee. As I said, I'm just going to open up the floor to you because I was there last night. I spoke to the council. A lot of frustration and a lot of confusion from last night has come up from our viewership, our readership, because there's still, from their perspective, seems to be so many unanswered questions. So I'm going to give you the floor, and why don't you tell us where you think things are at, where they need to be.
Where do I think things are at? I was at the meeting, as you know, last night. I spoke in public participation. I think the council president did I thought a nice job of keeping the meeting focused and keeping the politics out of it. I had an occasion to reach out to him this morning, and I shared that feedback with him. We had a cordial exchange, and it's been a couple of difficult years. But so I think the structure of it, the council president indicated about the invitation and me not being in an active participant role, and I accept his decision there. I appreciated him clarifying for me. So I thought the structure of it was appropriate. I think the takeaway of it is collectively the mayor's office, the council, and the school committee need to sit down and look at an amortization schedule for the city and look at what kind of debt we're dealing with currently. And as we enter into these hundreds of millions of dollars in the case of the Unified High School, we have an obligation to the taxpayer to look at what debt is coming our way prior to stacking more debt on top of it. And, I think, whether or not the council was aware that the $30 million initial bond back in '22, that all the principal interest were deferred. So, the council's looking at an $8 million bill just for that coming due in 2026. I think we need to all look around, sit at the table, everybody put their cards face up and say, here's what we're dealing with. Because we have the potential as a school district using bond money to really make some transformative changes in the city. But we can't do that at the taxpayer expense.
Right now, you're in a position where you've got the primary issues facing you. Now, let's loosely define them as, obviously, the completion of the Baldwin School. Number two, you've got issues that were discussed tonight, accessible bathrooms, ADA compliance more broadly across the school district. You've got Shea was still can rear its ugly head at any moment from NEASC, the accreditation agency. So you've got those type of issues, and then morphing from there into approaching all the costs associated with the unified high school. But the question that seems to loom large now is the ability of the city of Pawtucket to actually execute bonds on the promises made by, if you will, voter participation. Again, I continue to point out that individual citizens conflate their voter approval of a bond with the money actually appearing in the coffers of the City of Pawtucket School Committee. That seems to be the elephant in the room. Your thoughts?
Yeah, listen, I've been talking about bonding in the city for better part of a year now. I don't know that the city is at capacity to bond. I do know that over the last 4 years, the school district has been level funded. And during that same period, the city has come not once, not twice, but 3 times looking for financial bailouts from us to help them balance the budget. And when you add all of this debt service on, where is the revenue being generated from to cover that debt service? And particularly when you're in a historically low interest environment like we were back in 2018 and 2019 and 2022 when they actually took the $30 million bond, versus where we are now. I mean, the exposure to the taxpayer having to go out and bond the rest of Baldwin now isn't nearly, it's more significant than it would have been back in 22.
Right. You're level funded in a period that some would describe as approaching hyperinflationary. So you've got exploding costs across a sophisticated school district like this, labor costs, physical operating costs, and just healthcare costs and all these other line items that in and of itself represent a significant amount of money. How does the school committee continue to literally put out a product facing these kind of headwinds?
Yeah, I think that's the challenge we face, right? You're right. The price of everything has risen so dramatically, and to have been level funded over the last 4 years, and in fact, on a couple of occasions, given some money back to help the city balance their book at the end of the year. That's where I think this, what I'm hopeful for that came out of the meeting last night is that, again, everybody talks about collaboration, but talk is talk and action's actions. And if we all want to sit around the table with our cards all face up and say, this is what we anticipate coming on the debt service line, and show us that the city can afford it before we put the taxpayer in a position where they don't have a new unified high school, and the taxes have gone up, and we're financing a stadium rather than a school.
You made an incredibly important point last night. The foreknowledge and the current knowledge, based on just events in the last few weeks where significant public figures have visited the state and open conversation about, all the work going into Baldwin, going into Winters, all these different projects that have taken place, and a leading accessible a playground. All these amazing things are taking place that somehow people are still questioning how that could fall in the gaps as far as the necessary bonding to support it. And particularly given the tradition of the town being the front end, almost exclusively, of every financial instrument that involves the school committee. How are those days over? Is this going to have to be collaborative in the future so that no one can assume anything, or no one can pretend to have assumed anything, or no one can feign ignorance? Are those days over?
Well, I think the bonding piece, and I think that's important for everybody to recognize and understand, is it's always been collaborative. And the meeting that you heard last night multiple times saying, well, there used to be meetings before the bonds, and we used to talk with the city finances. We had those meetings. We had those meetings at the beginning of June in 23 as we laid out the cash flow for the city for the Baldwin project. It was our former long-term CFO, our project management team, and then the city finance team. So I don't know where the disconnect is, but the meeting that we've always had throughout all these bonding projects took place last year like it normally does, the beginning or towards the end of the fiscal year, and you lay out the year ahead. So where the disconnect comes from after that, I don't know.
Because many of us who are observers, some of us closer observers than others, are astonished that despite the issues surrounding the recently departed CFO, and I know you can't speak to that, and all the other issues with manpower and the transition after the highly esteemed Ms. Devine left, really had no impact whatsoever on the bonding process or on any of the processes which have represented a cash flow challenge to the school department. That's what's really the takeaway is. All these things happen with the finance department and the school committee, but none of it really had any impact whatsoever on the inability to generate proper cash flow to support the city's ongoing construction investments. Yikes.
I think, what else is there to say about that? The issues that the city wants to deflect onto the school department as being the cause of all of this has nothing to do with a bond that they should have issued
Right.
a year or 2 years ago.
Right. I mean, that bond, if that bond is issued,
If that bond's issued, we don't have this conversation.
Right, and I wanted to say, am I oversimplifying it? But it really, it's, if A happens, there's no B, but if A doesn't happen, there's B and C and D and E and F and G and H.
I think that's accurate.
Wow, stunning, or some would say a terrible turn of events. All right, so I would imagine meetings are going to take place in the immediate future about this bond anticipation note, revenue anticipation note, whatever the bond experts will call it. Have you received yet, and I know this is very fresh, have you received any sort of time frame on when that money can be anticipated, and what do they do in the meantime?
No, I think the ban is a shorter time frame from the beginning of that process. My understanding is it's 35, 40 days away
Right.
From receipt of the funds, and the bonding process can be anywhere from 90 days to 120 days.
Right.
So I think they're looking at a ban, excuse me, to bridge that gap,
A Band-Aid, if you will.
a Band-Aid, if you will.
Excellent. Okay, well then that's great news because, I recently, as you may or may not be aware, I recently visited the Baldwin site, and, by all accounts, it looks like it's going to be a beautiful facility. And if this can be overcome and this communication gap that really shouldn't exist and doesn't exist, in our humble opinion, at the Coalition Radio Network from the school district department, Pawtucket can continue essentially doing a refresh, a restart of its entire physical plant across Pawtucket for the school in a way that I'm not sure is happening anywhere in the Northeast.
Right, yeah, I think, listen, first, I need to acknowledge and commend the contractors at Baldwin who have shown up every day, who have put the work in, who continue to do so, all the while they're hearing all of this in the background about being shut off in April, and some of them,
Right.
had some payments due for a couple of months. So I want to commend the contractors, particularly our construction management firm, Chabonneau Construction, who has really stepped up. And, that was our plan all along, to go through this district, school by school, every child, every school, every day. And so let's hope that this is just a bump in the road and we can continue the process. But I think it's critically important that the city leaders all sit down around the table and we all look at the same financial information. That's the only way we're going to be able to truly assess where we are, what we have to work with, and what we can or cannot do going forward.
Final thought, final question, if you will. It's clear over the last few weeks, and again, if you're an observer, a close observer of the situation, as we like to think we are at the Coalition, that your superintendent, while still relatively new, has asserted herself in a way that's been remarkable, both on the political level, and I know we're not going to speak to that, but on the administrative level, and then the conversation that happened tonight about her outreach to a variety of communities to really get a handle on the physical calendar, timeline, implementation, coordination, all of that of the district. And that's got to be heartening both to the school committee to see, again, someone who's highly skilled, has a great resume, great background, but at the same time, walk into some pretty treacherous waters. And now it's just been literally a matter of months, is clearly in firm command of the school district.
Yeah, I think, I tell the superintendent all the time, that's why I voted for you. That's why I voted for you. I think you saw it tonight. I think you've seen it, particularly recently. She's confident. She's a leader. She knows the business. And I think, she puts the student at the center of every decision she makes. She's a collaborator. You heard that again this evening from the union president. She's not afraid to have the conversation with anybody.
Right.
But she's also not going to, she's not going to back down from anybody either.
No,
and
not
I
at all.
think that is, that is what makes her uniquely qualified to lead this district.
And on that note, I will point out that on top of all of that, I felt real love in the room between the students and a woman who is a couple of steps removed from their day-to-day life as superintendent. In just a few short months, we had basketball champions, both on the women's and men's side, who clearly already had a relationship with her. This was not some individual parachuting in a suit and saying, hey, great job. And there was a real connection there, and you could feel it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how I walked away from that interaction. You can see she connects with our students. She connects with them. They connect with her. That's all part of being a leader, right? Is your ability to connect with people, and this superintendent can do that better than most that I've seen.
Excellent. Well, Chairman Charbonneau, again, thank you for Chairman's Corner. Thank you always for spending time after a full and rewarding day. And best wishes to you and your family over the holidays coming up over the next week or so. And my sense is we'll be back at this again soon, won't we?
Yeah, listen, Pat, I want to thank you and the Coalition Radio Network. I've said it to you personally, and I'll say it to you on the air, that without you covering us for the last year and a half, we wouldn't have been able to get a perspective and our point of view out there. I appreciate what you do for this community, and happy Easter. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. See you soon.